I'm Clara Morgan, 35, and I've spent years being the family's invisible ATM. My parents never gave me a single gift, not for my birthday, not for my wedding, but for my younger sister's 30th. They planned a lavish party at a swanky Savannah seaside restaurant complete with champagne towers and a live band costing thousands. They expected me to foot the bill like always. I sat there watching them fawn over her, their smiles wide as they toasted her special day. My stomach churned. I'd had enough. When the check came, I pushed it across the table. "I'm not paying," I said, my voice steady but sharp. The room went silent. My mom's jaw dropped. My dad's eyes narrowed and my sister's face turned red. "You're joking," she snapped. But I wasn't. For the first time, I refused to bankroll their favoritism. They'd bought her $1 million house while I got nothing but excuses. That night, I drew a line: no more playing their game. What I didn't know was that my refusal would unravel a secret they'd buried for years. A secret about a trust fund, a house, and a betrayal that would change everything. Stick with me to find out how I turned their lies into a lesson they'd never forget. If you've ever felt taken for granted by family, hit that subscribe button and share your story in the comments. Let's talk about standing up for what's right together. A few days after the birthday party, I was going through Dad's financial papers. As a CPA, I'd been helping him with his taxes and investments for years, a routine I took on to keep things smooth at home. His office, tucked in the corner of our Savannah house, was a mess of folders and receipts. I was sorting through bank statements when a single document caught my eye, a thick, legal-looking packet with Family Trust Fund stamped across the top. My heart skipped a beat. I'd never heard of this before. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. The trust fund was tied to $1 million house, the one my sister Dawn lived in with her husband. But what stopped me cold was my name, Clara Morgan, listed as a co-trustee, alongside Mom and Dad. A co-trustee me. They'd never mentioned this, not once. I was supposed to have a say in how the trust was managed, but they'd kept me in the dark. The house, the one they'd handed to Dawn without a second thought, was part of a fund I was legally tied to. My chest tightened as the truth sank in. They'd deliberately hidden this from me. I reread the document line by line. It outlined the trust's purpose: to provide for family assets with clear instructions for co-trustees to approve major decisions like property transfers. Dawn's house was the only asset listed. I thought back to all the times Mom and Dad had brushed off my questions about their finances, saying, "Don't worry, it's handled." Handled for Dawn, apparently. I'd worked hard, built my own career, while they poured everything into her: a house, a lifestyle, all without a word to me. My mind raced. Why would they make me a co-trustee but never tell me? The answer was painfully clear. They wanted Dawn to have it all. No questions asked. I pictured Mom's forced smile at family dinners, Dad's vague excuses when I offered to review their accounts. They'd planned this banking on my trust to keep me oblivious. I felt a surge of anger, not just at them, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. As a CPA, I should have questioned their secrecy, but I'd let family loyalty cloud my judgment. I set the document down, my hands steady now. This wasn't just about a house, it was about fairness, about being sidelined in my own family. I thought of Dawn living in that sprawling colonial-style home by the Savannah coast, never once thanking me or wondering how it was funded. I'd always been the reliable one, the one who fixed their messes. But I was done playing that role. If I was a co-trustee, I had rights, and I wasn't going to let them sweep this under the rug. I grabbed my laptop and started digging into trust funds, learning what it meant to be a co-trustee in Georgia. The law was clear. I had the power to demand transparency, to question disbursements, even to challenge the trust's management. The more I read, the more I realized how much control I'd been denied. Mom and Dad had to know I'd find out eventually. Why else keep it so quiet? I wondered if they'd forged my signature on trust documents or just assumed I'd never look. Either way, their secrecy was a betrayal, one I couldn't ignore. I called a colleague from my accounting firm, someone I trusted, to get a second opinion. Without sharing too much, I asked about trust funds and co-trustee rights. She confirmed what I'd read. I had legal standing to request full records and could even freeze the trust's assets if mismanagement was suspected. Her words lit a spark in me. This wasn't just about hurt feelings, it was about accountability. I needed to know how deep this went, what else they'd hidden to prioritize Dawn. That document made me reflect on all the times my parents overlooked me. The trust fund discovery hit hard, but it wasn't the first time I'd felt sidelined. Growing up, Mom and Dad had a way of putting Dawn on a pedestal while I was left scraping for their approval. I'd worked tirelessly to build my career as a CPA, earning a promotion to senior accountant at a top Savannah firm. When I shared the news at a family dinner, Mom barely looked up from her plate. "That's nice," she said, then turned to Dawn, gushing about her new job as a part-time receptionist. "She's doing so well." Mom beamed as if my years of grinding meant nothing. I remembered the time I started my own accounting firm, a risky move that paid off. I was so proud, expecting at least a nod from Dad. Instead, he spent the evening talking about the car he'd bought Dawn, a shiny convertible she didn't even need. "She deserves it," he said, while I sat there, my achievement invisible. They'd never offered me a dime, not for college, not for my business, even though I'd always been the one to pull myself up. Meanwhile, they covered Dawn's rent for years, even when she bounced between jobs claiming she was figuring things out. The unfairness stung, but it wasn't just about money. It was the way they dismissed me, as if my hard work was expected, while Dawn's smallest steps were a triumph. I recalled a Christmas when I'd saved up to host a family gathering at my place. I spent days planning cooking, decorating, only for Mom to complain that Dawn couldn't make it because she was too stressed. They left early to check on her, leaving me with a table full of uneaten food and a sinking feeling. I couldn't shake those memories as I sat in my office, the trust fund papers still burning in my mind. How many times had I let their favoritism slide, telling myself it didn't matter, I'd always been the responsible one, the one who didn't make waves. But now, knowing I was a co-trustee they'd hidden from me, I saw it clearly. They'd taken my loyalty for granted, using it to prop up Dawn while keeping me in the dark. I needed to talk to someone, so I called my friend Vanessa, a lawyer, who always had a way of cutting through the noise. We met at a small cafe by the Savannah waterfront, the kind of place where the hum of conversation felt safe. I told her about the trust fund, how Mom and Dad had named me a co-trustee but never mentioned it. "That's not just unfair," Vanessa said, leaning forward, her coffee untouched. "It's deliberate. You're a CPA, you know how trusts work. They didn't want you asking questions." Her words hit like a spark. She urged me to dig deeper, to demand the full trust records. "You deserve answers, Clara," she said, her voice firm. "Don't let them brush you off again." Vanessa's encouragement was exactly what I needed. For years, I'd swallowed my frustration, thinking family meant putting up with their choices. But this wasn't just about a house or money, it was about respect, about my place in a family that seemed to value me less. I thought of all the times I'd stayed silent when Mom praised Dawn's potential, or Dad handed her cash for emergencies. They'd built a narrative where Dawn was the one who needed help, while I was just expected to keep going no matter what. Sitting in that cafe, I felt a shift. I wasn't going to be their invisible daughter anymore. Vanessa's advice gave me clarity. I had the skills and the right to uncover the truth. As a co-trustee, I could request every document, every transaction tied to that trust. If Mom and Dad thought they could keep favoring Dawn without consequences, they were mistaken. I left the cafe with a fire in my chest, determined to find proof of their favoritism, not just for me, but to show them I wasn't invisible. I started planning my next move. The trust fund wasn't just a piece of paper. It was evidence of how far they'd gone to prioritize Dawn. I'd search for more records, anything that showed what else they'd hidden. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about holding them accountable for years of sidelining me. By the weekend, I was rummaging through the storage shed behind the house. The shed tucked behind our family's Savannah home was a dusty maze of old furniture and forgotten boxes. I'd decided to search there, driven by a gut feeling that there was more to the trust fund than what I'd found in Dad's office. My resolve had hardened after recalling years of being sidelined, and I was determined to uncover any proof of what my parents had done. I pushed aside a stack of crates, my hands brushing against cobwebs, until I spotted a small rusted safe wedged in a corner. It was heavy, the kind you'd expect to hold something important. My heart raced as I pried it open with a crowbar, the hinges creaking after years of neglect. Inside was a collection of yellowed papers, letters, utility bills, and a folded contract labeled Savings Fund. The contract had my name on it, written in Grandma Mildred's neat handwriting. My grandmother, who'd passed years ago, had set up this fund for me, her eldest granddaughter, to help with my future. The amount was substantial enough to have changed my life. But as I dug deeper, my stomach sank. Among the papers was a transfer agreement signed by Mom and Dad, redirecting Grandma's savings fund to purchase the $1 million house where Dawn now lived. The contract was clear. The funds meant for me had been used to secure her home, with no mention of my consent. I sat back on the shed floor, clutching the papers, feeling a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Grandma Mildred had wanted to give me a head start, but my parents had taken that away to give Dawn everything. I read through the letters next. One, written by my grandmother, was addressed to me. "Clara," she wrote, "this fund is for your dreams, not theirs." Her words hit like a punch. She'd known Mom and Dad might favor Dawn. She'd seen it even back then. Another document showed the timeline. The savings fund was drained shortly after Grandma's death, funneled into the trust that bought Dawn's house. Mom's signature was scrawled at the bottom, Dad's beside it. They hadn't just hidden the trust from me, they'd erased my grandmother's intentions to prioritize their favorite. The hurt cut deep, but it fueled me. These papers weren't just evidence, they were proof of how far Mom and Dad had gone to put Dawn first. I'd always known they favored her, but seeing it laid out in black and white was different. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust, about family choosing one daughter over another. I gathered the documents, my hands shaking, not from anger, but from clarity. I'd confront them with this, make them face what they'd done. As I was locking the safe, Vanessa stopped by carrying takeout from a nearby diner. "Still buried in work?" she asked, nodding at the papers in my hand. I smiled, keeping it light. "Just sorting some old stuff," I said, not ready to share the discovery yet. We chatted briefly about my latest client at the firm, her upcoming case at the courthouse, normal friend stuff. Nothing heavy. Vanessa didn't pry, and I didn't need her to. This wasn't about emotional support. I was past that. I just needed someone to remind me of the world outside this mess. After she left, I sat with the documents again, piecing together my next steps. The transfer agreement was legally binding, but it violated Grandma's instructions. As a CPA, I knew I could challenge it. Trusts and estates were my expertise. I'd need to verify the signatures, cross-check the dates with bank records, and build a case. The thought of confronting Mom and Dad was daunting, but I couldn't let this slide. They'd taken something meant for me and given it to Dawn without a second thought. I tucked the papers into a folder, my resolve stronger than ever. This wasn't about getting even. It was about reclaiming what was mine, about honoring Grandma Mildred's wishes. I'd use these documents to demand answers, to make my parents see they couldn't rewrite my future for Dawn's benefit. The shed felt quieter as I stepped out, the weight of the evidence in my hands. I was ready to face them, no matter how hard they fought back. The next week, I sat down to draft a legal letter. The documents from Grandma Mildred's safe were still fresh in my mind, their weight pushing me to act. As a CPA, I knew the power of paper, numbers, and signatures don't lie. I spent hours at my desk in my Savannah apartment crafting a letter to Mom and Dad demanding they repay the savings fund they'd diverted to buy Dawn's house. If they didn't, I'd sue to liquidate the $1 million property tied to the family trust. Every word was deliberate, backed by the evidence I'd found. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was a co-trustee, and I had rights. I sent the letter by certified mail, ensuring they couldn't ignore it. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a call from Mom. "How could you do this?" She shouted, her voice sharp with anger. "You're being so selfish, Clara." I gripped the phone, my pulse steady. "Selfish?" I shot back. "You took what Grandma meant for me and gave it to Dawn. I'm just asking for what's fair." She sputtered, accusing me of tearing the family apart, but I held firm. Dad got on the line next, his tone colder. "You're making a mistake," he said. "This won't end well for you." His words stung, but they didn't sway me. I'd seen the proof they couldn't talk their way out of it. That evening, Dawn called, her voice a mix of panic and defiance. "What are you doing, Clara?" she demanded. "You can't just threaten to take my house." I took a deep breath, keeping my tone even. "I'm not threatening, Dawn. I'm asking for the money Grandma left me." "You've been living off it without a word to me," she stammered, claiming she didn't know about the savings fund, but her excuses rang hollow. I could hear the fear in her voice. She wasn't used to being challenged. For years, she'd coasted on Mom and Dad's favoritism, never questioning where the money came from. The next morning, I got a surprise call from Dawn's husband. I'd met him a few times at family events, but we'd never been close. "Clara, what's this about a trust fund?" he asked, his voice cautious but curious. I explained the basics. I was a co-trustee of the family trust that funded their house, and Mom and Dad had used my savings fund without my consent. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "I didn't know you were involved. They never mentioned you?" His words confirmed what I'd suspected. Mom and Dad had kept him in the dark too. "Can you send me the details?" he asked. I promised to share what I could, sensing a crack in the family's united front. Patrick, as I'd later call him, was starting to question their story. Mom and Dad's anger didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. They'd always painted me as the dependable one, the one who didn't need help. Now, when I stood up for myself, they called me selfish, as if fairness was a betrayal. Dawn's call only deepened the sting. She didn't even try to understand my side. But Patrick's doubt gave me a spark of hope. If he was questioning things, maybe the truth wasn't as buried as they thought. I spent the next few days preparing for their response. I knew Mom and Dad wouldn't back down easily. They'd built their world around protecting Dawn. But I wasn't backing down either. As a CPA, I'd dealt with tough clients and complex audits. This was no different. I reached out to a lawyer I'd worked with on business contracts, asking for advice on trust disputes. She confirmed my letter was a strong first step, clear, legal, and grounded in evidence. If they didn't comply, I could escalate to court, forcing the trust to sell the house to settle the debt. The weight of it all pressed on me, but I felt a strange calm. For years, I'd let their favoritism slide, thinking it was my job to keep the peace. Now I was done. The letter wasn't just about money, it was about making them see me not as their invisible daughter, but as someone who deserved respect. Patrick's call lingered in my mind. His doubt was a sign the truth could shift things. I didn't know what they'd do next, but I was ready to push forward no matter how hard they fought. A few days later, I got a call from an unfamiliar lawyer. His voice was calm but firm, introducing himself as the attorney who'd handled Grandma Mildred's estate. He'd heard about my legal letter through a colleague and had something urgent to share. "Your grandmother left a will," he said, "one your parents never disclosed." My breath caught. Grandma had passed years ago, and I'd assumed everything was settled. He explained that she'd left me a small seaside shop in Savannah and a separate savings account, both meant to secure my future. But Mom and Dad had concealed it, claiming the assets were tied up in the family trust. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, the phone pressed to my ear. The lawyer read from the will detailing Grandma's intentions. "She knew your parents favored your sister," he said. "She wanted to protect you. Grandma Mildred had seen their favoritism long before I did, writing clauses to ensure I'd have something of my own. The shop, a quaint storefront by the coast, was meant for me to run or sell as I saw fit. The savings account, though smaller than the one I'd found in the safe, was a safety net she'd crafted just for me. My chest ached, not from anger, but from the love she'd shown hidden all this time. Mom and Dad had buried this will just like they'd buried my savings fund. I thanked the lawyer, my voice steady despite the shock. He promised to send copies of the will and advised me to consult my own attorney to enforce it. As I hung up, I felt a mix of gratitude and betrayal. Grandma had believed in me, seen my worth when my parents hadn't. But their secrecy cut deeper than ever, another layer of their choice to prioritize Dawn. That evening, Dawn showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her face was flushed, her eyes blazing as she stormed in. "You're destroying our family with that letter," she shouted, pacing my living room. "Mom and Dad did everything for us, and you're punishing them." I stood by the counter, keeping my composure. "Everything for you, Dawn," I said evenly. "They hid Grandma's will from me. They gave you a house with my money. That's not family, that's unfair." She scoffed, insisting Mom and Dad had no choice, that the trust was complicated. But her words faltered, and I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. She wasn't used to me pushing back. I didn't raise my voice or let her bait me. "You've always gotten what you wanted," I told her. "But I'm done letting them erase me." Dawn tried to argue, claiming I was blowing things out of proportion, but I cut her off. "I have proof, Dawn. Grandma's will, the savings fund, they kept it all from me." She froze, her defiance crumbling for a moment. Then she stormed out, slamming the door, leaving me in silence. Her outburst didn't shake me. If anything, it made me more certain. Grandma Mildred's will wasn't just a gift, it was a lifeline, a reminder that someone in our family had valued me. I pulled out my laptop and started organizing my evidence: the savings fund contract, the transfer agreement, and now the will. I'd need to meet with my lawyer soon to map out the next steps. Mom and Dad's secrecy, Dawn's denial, it all pointed to a bigger confrontation ahead. I wasn't looking to tear them apart, but I wouldn't let them hide the truth anymore. I was ready to face them, armed with the facts and Grandma's trust in me. A week later, I walked into the lawyer's office. The room was stark, with a long table and shelves of legal books lining the walls. I carried a folder with the evidence: the savings fund contract from the safe, Grandma Mildred's will, and the trust documents. Mom, Dad, Dawn, and Patrick sat across from me, their faces tense. Vanessa was there as a witness, her expression neutral, sitting quietly to the side. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with a steady voice, opened the meeting, asking me to present my case. I laid out the papers methodically, starting with the savings fund meant for me, diverted to buy Dawn's house. "This was Grandma's gift to me," I said, pointing to her handwritten letter. "You used it without my knowledge." I moved to the will, detailing the seaside shop and savings account Mom and Dad had hidden. As co-trustee, I was never informed of my role or these assets. My voice was calm but firm. I ended with my demand: they pay the trust's maintenance fees, backdated for years of neglect, or I'd push to liquidate the house to cover the costs. Mom's face reddened. "You're tearing us apart over money." She snapped, her hands clenched. "We did what was best for the family." Dad leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "You've always been so independent, Clara. Why can't you let this go?" I met his gaze. "Because it's not just money, it's about fairness. You hid Grandma's wishes to favor Dawn." Their objections felt rehearsed, a wall to deflect the truth. Dawn sat rigid, her eyes darting between me and the documents. Patrick, though, surprised me. "Clara's right," he said, breaking the silence. "If she was entitled to those funds, you should have told her." His voice was steady, and I saw Dawn flinch beside him. "I work in banking," he continued. "Trusts don't work like this. Hiding a co-trustee's role is wrong." His support caught Mom and Dad off guard, their expressions shifting from anger to unease. Mom tried to pivot. "Dawn needed the house more," she insisted. "You were always fine on your own." I shook my head. "That's not your call to make. Grandma chose me for those assets." Dad scoffed, accusing me of exaggerating, but the lawyer intervened. "These documents are clear," he said, tapping the will. "Clara has grounds to enforce her rights." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Vanessa remained quiet, her role limited to observing, her presence a reminder of the legal stakes. I took a deep breath and made my final move. "I'm done being your silent co-trustee," I said. "I'm stepping down from the role, but not from this fight. Pay the fees or the trust will sell the house to settle the debt." Dawn gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Mom's eyes widened and Dad's jaw tightened. They hadn't expected me to walk away from the trust entirely. Patrick nodded slightly, his acknowledgement a small victory. But Mom and Dad's defiance didn't waver. "You'll regret this," Dad warned, his voice cold. I didn't flinch. "I regret trusting you, to be fair," I replied. The lawyer closed the meeting, advising them to consider my demand seriously. As we stood to leave, Dawn avoided my gaze, and Mom muttered something about family loyalty. I felt the sting of their words, but no doubt in my choice. Walking out, I felt lighter, unburdened by the role they'd forced on me without consent. The evidence was public now, the truth laid bare. Patrick's support was a crack in their united front, and I knew it would shift things. I wasn't sure what they'd do next, but I'd made my stand. The fight for fairness wasn't over, but I'd taken control, and that was enough for now. After the meeting, I drove to Grandma Mildred's shop. The small seaside storefront stood quietly along Savannah's coast, its weathered sign a reminder of her care for me. I decided to sell it not out of spite, but to build something new. The sale closed quickly, fetching enough to start a personal fund for my future, a fresh start, free from my family's shadow. I invested the money wisely, using my CPA skills to secure my independence in Savannah, where I could live on my own terms. Mom, Dad, and Dawn couldn't pay the trust's maintenance fees. The lawyer had warned them, but they ignored it, clinging to their excuses. The trust moved to liquidate the $1 million house, and the sale barely covered the overdue fees and a hefty tax debt. Mom and Dad's finances crumbled under the strain, their savings drained by their refusal to face the truth. Dawn lost the house she'd taken for granted, forced to rent a small apartment and find a stable job for the first time. The consequences of their favoritism hit hard, a bitter gift I didn't need to deliver. They'd brought it on themselves. I chose to cut off all contact. No more calls, no more visits. I blocked Mom's number after her last angry voicemail accusing me of betrayal. Dad sent a curt text claiming I'd ruined them, but I didn't respond. Dawn never reached out, and I didn't expect her to. Walking away wasn't easy. Family ties linger even when they hurt, but it was necessary. Their choices had built a wall I no longer wanted to climb. The surprise gift wasn't revenge. It was letting them face the fallout of their unfairness. By prioritizing Dawn, they'd gambled their stability and lost. I felt no joy in their downfall, only relief that I'd reclaimed my worth. Grandma Mildred's legacy, her shop, her will, gave me the strength to break free, to stop begging for their acknowledgement. This journey taught me a hard lesson: don't let family unfairness define your worth. Set boundaries, protect your rights, and don't fear cutting off toxic ties. I spent years invisible to my parents, but I learned to value myself, to fight for what's mine. Savannah's quiet coast became my refuge, a place to rebuild without their judgment. Thank you for listening to my story until the end. I appreciate your empathy. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do in my situation?